Well, here we are on the Quora site again. This is just a website where people can post a question or answer type thing and then have all kinds of people talk about it. Seems to be one of the few of them that seem to be somewhat still open, although they have a word catcher that if you say certain words, it catches it. Other than that, you're free to speak, which is strange now all of a sudden in even America, where we invented the concept of free speech, but people don't want to have that anymore because truth sucks. You've got to have this thing. Well, not to get into that at all. Here's the question that was asked that I was directed to. Was the ancient Europe originally black? Now, this is, of course, the Cheddarman problem that we dealt with about a year and a half ago, where we had already had a recreation and everything, and then, lo and behold, they rolled out one that was covered with mahogany shoe polish and was instantly rejected, and all kinds of scientists and geneticists weighed in on it and showed you that it was a joke. In fact, they found somebody, the closest relative of which, and he, even though he doesn't appear to have that SLC gene that makes everybody porcelain skinned like a Nordic, he's not Nordic, he was an Irish man, and he looked like an old fisherman. And he made the joke that he's not black, but he does get a pretty good tan out in the sun. What's also bad about this as a starting point is if you look right below the questions that's asked, you'll see that the place that's been tagged is like, here's a question, was realhistorywww.com. World History, Ancient Dubra Thrace, 1.htm. This is the Afrocentric website that tries to tell everybody that everyone was black until 500 years ago, and Mean Whitey took over and stole all their stuff. Yeah, it's one of those. But you know what's odd about it is that you can tell that they know about real history, even though they call themselves that, and they have really not much about true history in there. They do have some true history. The problem ensues that they just keep claiming that they were black. That if anybody is darker than a sheet of paper or this background that you see here, somehow they must be black. They've claimed everything from Chinese to Vikings to God knows what, but so let's look at some answers that were given here. Claire Jordan here says that she worked at a national health service. I guess it's supposed to give her credibility, but then she says this. Yes, sort of. At the end of the last ice age, about 10,000 years ago, most of the people in Europe seem to have had dark skin but pale eyes, similar to this kid. Then they show this picture. Notice his nappy hair and stuff, but this is actually a black child. Now, there's a genetic anomaly that black people can get a blue eye. It's 16 times more rare than albinism, but it's a genetic eye defect, and the way I understand it is there's a fatty layer that forms inside the retina, and it ends up screwing up the color of the eye, so it's not really even a true blue eye. And that 90% of the time they don't even get a blue eye. They get more of a, instead of brown, it turns a light gold, and you might get some green into it. The blue is quite unique. Here's the problem that ensues with this also. Somebody with a good Photoshop program has already looked at this thing and said somebody took and outlined the eyes and did something to it. And he said that he couldn't prove that they inserted other people's eyes, but his thought was that the eyes seem like they're too tilted back in his socket. He's almost facing, looking straight at you or just above you here, but yet his eyes are tilted back at a point way up here and something. And it's not just that he's looking up, because in reality he's not really looking up very much. Could be, though, that they just enhanced this in some way. But this is a Negroid child, and this is not what they look like. So she tries to throw in, well, yeah, but they had blue eyes, but... And then down after the picture, after she's interjected this, she says, except probably with less frizzy hair. Yeah. So they wouldn't have had this hair or any genetics that are attached to black people whatsoever. But here we go with the claim. Now, very first thing comes right off the bat. I'd like to mention that it seems like that was a setup, and it's probably a fake account or somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about or have been duped into some type of belief, because she showed somebody much darker and very different than even the depiction of Cheddar Man, which we'll look at here shortly. John Nanez says, whoops, they were nowhere near as dark as you claim. Anatomically modern humans have been living in Europe for over 50,000 years. Now that's Cro-Magnon man. Its DNA still exists today. But according to you, we did not change at all, except the eye color, for 40,000 years. But in the last 10,000 years, all the changes happened at once. I don't believe it. All humans in Europe had adapted to significantly colder climate, significantly less or weaker sunlight. In order to adapt to the cold, they most likely grew more body hair. This also came along straight hair. Straight hair helps with vitamin D absorption. Both are traits that pretty much do not exist in modern sub-Saharan populations. Well, if they get admixed, they'll get that good hair, as they call it, and so on. And they try desperately to get that, or they just get a hair hat. But so this idea of this lighter skin and lighter rays and skin rays, it's not proof at all. In fact, it was this theory that people came out with that somehow we were all the same, and then all of a sudden this rapid change happened, as you can see by him saying, well, if they went out of Africa at around 50 to 70,000, and then there's Cro-Magnon even in North Africa that's endemic to it, and Homo sapiens happened 315,000 years in North Africa. You know, they try to say we all come out of Africa, therefore wouldn't have been a black person. In fact, it wouldn't have been somebody with a dark skin. They try to take somebody and say, well, they would have had an olive skin, a little bit cardboardish, not so pale as a Nordic normally looks. Oh, well, then why did they try to push out that silly picture like that? Well, it's a modern thing, and they said, well, we're trying to do it to make people feel more, comfortable with each other and push this racist narrative thing, but it really backfired extremely bad. And people really need to quit doing this, because I don't know about you, but it's gotten past disgusting. So he tells you here, these differences were likely small, but 10,000 years ago, before present, these dark-skinned people did not exist anymore. They got evaporated in. Well, the strange thing is the Basques seem like they have a remnant of it too in them, that they're one of the people that seem to have been there before, and a remnant of that. They're right there near France, and no, nobody's going to be confused them slightly with admixed. Oh, key point here too, the Dubra face thing, Thracians, that it tries to pinpoint as black people. Xenophanes, I believe it was, ancient Greek, said that those people had blonde and gold hair and blue eyes. Thracians. Yeah, the Dacians and Thracians. There's this Proto-Thracian people that are there. And if you look them up, which we don't want to have to go now, but they're Proto-Indo-Europeans. They had Proto-Indo-European linguistics. This comes out of that Hittites and everybody that's up there. Yeah, one of their symbols was a horse eventually, and so on, but that really definitely doesn't have anything to do with who they're trying to connect it to. How about the eye color? All humans today have any other eye color except brown. I'm one of them. I have an ancestry who lived some 7,000, 6,000 years ago in the Caucasus region. Basically, the mutation for light eyes happened only once and not at all that long ago. Well, see, there's a problem with that statement that was there. They're actually saying that all blue-eyed people are related to this one person. Okay? But that does not indicate that blue eyes were not before that time. In fact, what we're talking about right now shows it and proves it. For even the darker skinned people that were there, along with the lighter skinned Caucasians. So one looked like it was pretty well tanned and the other not so much, but got good tans. I don't know if you're aware, but the Swedish bikini team gets good tans. Whenever I was a kid, there was Hawaiian Tropic girls and all that stuff, and Swedish bikini team, and I'm telling you, they would get some real good tans on them. Yeah. So in a modern day, people don't do this so much. It's kind of changed, but then people want to act foolish and say foolish things, like people can't stand the sun or things like that. And then you look into heat stroke statistics, and it seems to backfire in their face again. Recently, it happened on one of my sites. So he tells you, putting all this information together, though, let me go back to this 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. Yeah, a few have said that. A few have said 10,000. So we're going to go with 10,000 years ago, because that's whenever that guy lived, apparently. And then looking back, they said, boom. But this is this SLC gene, right? And you have to have that to have blue eyes, right? So that makes it right? Nope. All Indo-Europeans that they've ever found. In fact, Dr. David Reich, who's world famous, and the guy from the German Institute there, Johannes Krauss, both of them have stated on camera and with their sites that every single one of these supposedly dark-haired people, dark-skinned people, or darker-skinned, or Mediterranean-type people, or whichever way they wanted to pronounce it, they all had blue eyes. And it doesn't connect to that gene that you're trying to connect it to. But a blue-eyed, pale-skinned people that had that gene happened about 10,000 years ago. And if anybody has blue eyes, they're supposedly connected to that person. Did he have a great-grandfather that had blue eyes? Well, I'm pretty certain of it. The way I found out how genetic works, and so small a pieces gets hooked into everybody's chromosomes as it follows down the line, I'm positive of it. In fact, I'll venture to say that it goes back a lot longer. And also we see lighter eyes in Neanderthals, so we can venture to say that somehow, very short in the very first happenings of Neanderthal and Homo sapiens at 315,000 years ago, somewhere in there, due to an integration with some other species like Neanderthal, bing, and it popped this thing off. But yet they did not have this porcelain skin gene of a Nordic yet. You know, there are a lot of Caucasians that aren't Nordic. And in fact, there are a lot of Caucasians that are Nordic ancestry that live in the Middle East and in Egypt, and they have pretty good tans. Let's continue. Putting this information together, he's led to believe that the most accurate reconstruction of a European man 10,000 years ago would have been brown eyes. Nope, that would be blue, and they've only found blue. Long, straight hair, or slightly curly, or brown hair, and light skin. Possibly somewhat darker than Europeans have today, but still light. Basically the complete opposite of the girl's picture. Well, I'm going to say no, it's not the opposite of the picture. Get rid of the phenotype, because it's not that phenotype, so it's a Caucasian. And then give it blue eyes, and then give it dark to medium brown hair that's curly or straight somewhat, and then we'll have that. And so what are they? Well, they're the Caucasians. Just like all the depictions were, even the depiction of the one that's covered with shoe polish, which is like 9 out of 10 on the scale they decided to throw in there. There are so many admixed black people around that have lighter skin than that, it's not even funny. There's been a lot of comments about that. So it's possible that your description is indeed true. I do speculate a lot, but taking everything into consideration, I'd say the likelihood is very, very low. Why don't you post this as a answer? Well, they ask if there's any reliable source for that. How could somebody with such dark skin survive winter in most of Europe without dying from vitamin deficiency? Vitamin D, see, if you don't get enough sunlight, you don't get enough vitamin D. Now, Caucasians haven't really had to worry about it because they have this auto thing that they tan if they're in a lot of sunlight, and they get pale to absorb more whenever they're not. It's amazing. Magic adaptable melanin. But if you took somebody with extremely dark skin, say her picture, and put them in northern areas, and they were not able to eat and drink milk with vitamin D in it, and our plethora of foods nowadays that have this vitamin D in it, they would be stricken with rickets. Every single one of them. It would be rare and hard to be able to get out of that situation. Yeah, it still happens today, but thankfully the Caucasians figured out a long time ago to help them and the rest of the world out. Vitamin D has a lot to do with that, and bone formations and so on, and the energy of the sun, children of the sun, and that all works out. Also with that scientist thing. So Claire's answer, though, which also shows you that she's not really aware, and then she doesn't put that she's in this health field anymore, says genetic analysis of bodies found in both England and Spain. That's her proof. And it's like, yeah, well, that did never show up to be anything that would be like your kid that she showed at all, except for the eyes, which are even in question on that picture. Not in question that it can possibly happen. Perhaps it was still cold enough for snowfields, which increased the amount of glare. Or perhaps they lived in North Africa and only traveled further north in the summer. Now, let's take that apart, shall we? We're running around, we was snowfields. It didn't happen, and it's odd that people try to give this ideal, but now she's going to have this idea that how they could have got the extra sun was these glare off this thing, and that would have just made it just fine. Well, if that would have made it just fine, then Caucasians would have never had to develop light skin during the last ice age, when there definitely were snowfields all over the place because of the glare. Wah, wah. Look, it just falls apart. How about the idea that all primates, which humans appear to be a portion of, have pale skin up under their hair, regardless of what hair color is, goes on, like orange and orangutans, which is like a redhead. But there's an exception to that, is the gorilla and the bonobo, of course. And so there are dark-skinned people that live in the islands that aren't related to black people, as we're talking about negroids, like Australian Aborigines and the headhunters of Irian, Jaya, New Guinea, and the Highlandish people. They aren't related to them. In fact, negroids aren't related to the Nilotic forms in Africa, or the Khoisan that are way down south, or the pygmies that are trapped in the middle of all that and taking the brunt of it. None of them. That's the reason they keep telling you that there's so much genetic diversity there. There's endemic Caucasians, like the berbers, all across and around the Mediterranean. They're still there, and the Egyptians. But lo and behold, there's all these other forms too, and you can't find that in other places. It's not, across the known world in the other part, it's really the same, or you can get a mix at borders, but you're not getting a mix of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That can only happen right there. There's a four corner situation where inside of a few hundred miles you could experience 4 of the 6. But she's going to go with glare, by the way. I wonder if I should look at more comments, if somebody's going to laugh at her about glare. I've heard red hair and possibly lighter skin tone too is inherited from the Neanderthals. Is it probable? And if yes, then how does this work when the Neanderthal vanished some 50,000 years ago? Well, actually, Neanderthals appeared to have lived on in the genetics of other people after 50,000 years, but it seemed to peter out. And of course, everybody always said, well, here comes Cro-Magnon, so that was the big change. And no, Cro-Magnon has some Neanderthal integration from intergressing with apparently some Neanderthal hybrid people. That's the reason Caucasians have such a small amount. I mean, 1.5 to, what is it, 3.5% is an average, 1.5 to 4. They quote all kinds in there. 4 would be kind of a high end of the number, and in Orientals, you actually get it up to 6%. And the median on the bottom is changed too, from 1.5 to like 2.5. So it's a little higher variation there. Then there's, of course, there's Denisovans and so on too, but sub-Saharans don't have that at all. But they have recently found that they have up to 19% of an unknown ghost hominid. So it's an unknown hominid that no other humans have that make up 20% almost of their genetics. It's one reason they're, always wonder why they're, well, if everybody's all the same, why is it so different? I mean, Oriental people get, yeah, sure, they're different, a little shorter, their eyes have that effect and so on, but what's radically different? Are then those islanders with a darker skin? Is it just they got tanned for so many years? No, it's not, doesn't really work that way. So, Arthur Dent says, don't be absurd. There are countless descriptions of ancient texts. Ancient Greeks were different tribes, some blonde with blue eyes and fair complexions, as Alexander the Great is described. And then some were olive-skinned with darker features, as it depends on sun exposure or tanning. They never look like native African populations, though. Take a black population from Africa and take them to the north. Will they be lighter after a few generations? No, they won't. They won't wax pale during a generation, like stay out of the sun for a while and get lighter, and things like they don't get that very much. There's a little bit of tan effect to them, but not much. Skin color means nothing, and accurate and scientific provide information, answers when we choose to answer. If we don't know, we better be silent. Why is that? The UV index is relatively the same. Claire clicks in with, I don't know. If we know, maybe there were still a lot of snowfields which increased glare, so she doubles down on the glare. Is it possible, Claire, that they were just tanner than you? In fact, if you look at your little picture there, and then this guy that's above you, and he's got a little bit of sun, there's that olive skin there, and that they would have looked something like that, or maybe if he got a tan a little more even. You'd be amazed, Claire, that if you are really that person, if he went out in the sun all summer long and spent a few weekends, and 4th of July's and camping and stuff, you would get much darker than the guy over here, this Cody. I don't know if you ever heard of tanning beds, but let's just continue. And eyes made out of universes. Sorry. Yeah, there's some other idea where they said that they had faked those eyes and stuff out of it and so on. So let's not view other comments there. Let's go on, because here's Walter Smith. He's fascinated by ancient history and genetics as I am. He tells her that the answer, did they look like this? Well, of course not. He says, no, not at all. The ancient hunter-gatherers of Europe came in a range of different skin tones from different parts of Asia. 37,000-year-old Romanian Oase man recreated, they believed it looked a little bit more like this. I think you can see that he doesn't quite have that perfectly straight hair of Orientals at this point. There's an oddity where that comes in at, but he has slightly folded corners of his eyes and a nose that's reminiscent of what you would say, that's a Japanese or an Oriental type nose. And you also see it in Eskimos quite a bit. He is from the northern Romania area, so on. Of course, when this guy was found here 37,000 years ago, this would have been up in the ice. This would have been pre-proto Inuit Eskimo type people. Some forms of them. Some forms of the Eskimo look very much like Hopi Indians. I mean, there's variations on a theme that go there, so we can't really go with that. But you can see him. But I want to tell you that when I used to play golf and stuff, and of course when I was a kid and everything, during summers where I got to spend all summer out doing things, I got much darker than this. In fact, I'd play golf once a week, basically, sometimes twice, if I could get it in. and I would get much darker than this. Let's continue. So here's a 28,000-year-old French Cro-Magnon man, and he was recreated with the tumors that he had on his face when he's alive. Here we go. Well, we can see that they've given him kind of ambiguous hair. They said it's brown and just hit midtones, although they put some lighter stuff in his beard. Just between you and me, every time I've seen this recreation, I think of Robin Williams in Jumanji. Can you see it? If they took those bumps off around his nose and the tumor on his forehead there off, you'd realize that, no wait, Robin Williams was even darker skinned than this, but that's probably due to tanning. This Cro-Magnon man would have probably had lighter eyes too. They're just showing as a grayish color here. If you look at his skull over here on the right, though, there's that indented part on that. You may have noticed that, and dead people died with a tumor, and how that can even fibrate into your skull cap a little bit, and so they think, hey, he had a tumor here. I don't think they show up right around his nose, as most of that's eroded away. His nasal slit and things are gone. But also they were buried, as you see down here. Don't know if it shows up, but they're swathed with red ochre, especially around their heads. Can you see that? Yeah. So this is a guy that's 29,000 years ago, and they have the genetics from Cro-Magnon now at 29,000 years ago. And lo and behold, he had blue eyes. So where's that 10,000 number at? Well, it's just, well, all the people even before that, they had the darker skin they're talking about. It goes back many tens of thousands of years. So far, everyone they've tested has blue eyes too. Yeah. Let's continue. Look at a few other variations. Here's a 24,000-year-old Neanderthal hybrid Lapido child recreated. I don't know about you, but it kind of looks a little bit odd and Jap animation type thing here with the bigger eyes. I'm sure whenever it grew up, it would have looked not so anime, but here's a 24,000-year-old European carving. Yeah, this is art from back then, done in ivory. The face, and it shows that he portrays himself with long, straight hair. You can kind of see it on in here. They also mention there's red ochre on this thing. Oh, well, did it have red hair? Well, it's kind of, there's still some red ochre here on his skin too. Now, they're not sure if he rubbed it on and rubbed it off his face a little bit, but kept it on his hair more because he was dark tannish red and had a red hair or something on him. When just they could have dipped it too. I mean, they've taken ducks and found them totally dipped, and I challenge you to find a solid red ochre duck looking thing. So red ochre actually has other symbologies to go on with that, along with the burials that have been seen back over 100,000 years that we've talked about before. But this is a Cro-Magnon man. About the same time or a little before, there's that Holfels cave version where it showed a man full body statuette, and he's got a lion's head on it. Well, you can see if this guy here grows out much larger, like Conan the Barbarian, and gets all frizzy, you could tell him that he looked like a lion. Well, wait, especially if he had blonde hair. Let's continue. 7,700-year-old blonde, blue-eyed Northern European Mesolithic hunter-gatherer recreated. Here it is. They've got him shave-headed, so they don't have to worry about it and get ambiguous whether he's brown or not. But I tell you, this guy looks like Dean that works in the office over there. Dark skin. Oh, so this is what they're talking about, because this is those dark-skinned people. What does the recreation look like on them? Right here. This is Labrana man, Spain, dated 7,000 years ago. 7,000 years BC, whatever. And so this is more what we're talking about than something that like people saw Cheddar Man. He says Cheddar Man carried haplogroups that originated in the Middle East and not in Africa. So why would you try to make him look like African skin tone? In fact, here's Cheddar Man that they redid almost a mahogany color, and I want you to know that most, if not all, people that are seriously into this in genetics disagree with this depiction and said, that olive skin of Mona Lisa you were talking about sure became mahogany rubbed down skin polish. Of course, if you'll look, some of the depictions they showed up weren't in bright light, and so all of a sudden it looked a whole lot darker, and they were trying to push these issues. You can see he has Caucasian type hair too. The funny thing is, if you look up that man that's related to him very closely, he kind of looks like him. He's kind of got a big nose like that too and stuff, but white as hell. Yeah, white people can have big noses too. Ask Louis DeRocher, or Babe Ruth, or 1,000 others. Middle Eastern farmers migrated to Europe 9,000 years ago and replaced most of these hunter-gatherers, but none of them was anything other than a Caucasian phenotype. Here's a 9,000-year-old Greek woman recreated from and it says looks like modern Greeks. Somehow I believe they gave her an underbite there. It looks like her bottom jaw is sticking out an underbite. She looks a little bit pissed off too and concerned and kind of asking you, who you calling black? Yeah, they're ambiguous on the eyes again at this point. But if it was the darker skinned form of people, everyone has blue eyes. And so then if you looked at her, you'd be like, what? Kind of looks like Sigourney Weaver steroids. Vlada Mikhailov says, no, the term black is very misleading since it has connotations to African. Well, let me clarify that. Even though we say African today and a lot of times mean sub-Saharans or Negroids, because they don't like that word either. And we refer to Oriental type people as Asians, even though all of Asia was Caucasian. Yeah, Asia Minors, Anatolia, and so on. So whenever we get that idea of African, there could be African, North African people, and so on, and you'll see quite often if they try to give any genetic reference to people of North Africa, like Berbers, and people that were crossed and mixed with those Phoenicians and ended up in North, they go like, aha, you're part black. And it's like, who put black? Oh, like you put black in the situation. Reality didn't do so. Oh, so there are many dark-skinned populations around the world that do not consider themselves black, by the way. Europeans and Africans diverged more than 50,000 years ago, and ancient Europeans did not resemble Africans in any way. Well, actually, the divergence appears to be at least 2.1 million years ago from what is a current sub-Saharan African type to like Caucasoid types. Others believe that they have found the truth of the matter is Dracopithecus fabergé back at about 7.2 million years ago, and that, looking more like humans than even the 2.1 they tried to pull off, say that may not even be out of Africa, and in fact it may be into and then forming and then back out of Africa because it predated the out of Africa theory, but in a place that's out of Africa. There's another one found called Oranopithecus macedoniensis. Dates around the same time. In fact, people have realized when they look at them closer, they go, well, this has to be a variation on a theme that you'll see in any population. Perhaps they're exactly the same one, same thing. So you can say that the ancient Europeans look similar to Middle Eastern with light hair, though. So they would have been like having a good tan. Them being black is a fabrication to raise Africans' level of low self-esteem because of the colonization of Western Europe. What you have quoted is a delusional Afrocentric website, that www.history.com. It claims, that website, that Russians were supposedly black, because there's a thing called a black Russian, in 1100 to 1400s AD, even though looking at the paintings, looking at genealogy, and studying Russian population genetics, there's no trace of any recent African ancestry. That reminds me of the guy that tried to tell the dude that King George was black, and can you see it? Can you see it? And showed it to him, and you're looking at it, and you're like, no. And then he shows the Vikings and other stuff. Then the guy just starts asking him Mozart and everything, and they claim, oh, they're all black. And then he says Shakespeare, and he goes, undoubtedly black. I could pull it up for you if you want. The majority of people claiming Europe to have been black are usually African Americans who have a combination of feeling inferior and not wanting to do with their West African roots because it involved tribal slavery before we ever met them, continental slavery later, and kidnapping, perhaps you would look at it that way, from their own people at first. This is why they claim cultures and histories that are not theirs. Multiple genetic tests have been conducted on European populations. The areas with the highest black or African ancestry is Italy. That's from people coming in with some admix into them, though. More specifically, southern Italy, followed by some areas in Portugal. However, the percentages are still small. This was due to slave trades that went on there, and that's why Portugal's involved too. In Sicily, the average is only around 5 to 15%, depending on where you're in the area. Likewise, in Portugal and Spain, African ancestry in the local populations is also minuscule at 5% average. I don't know the exact numbers on that, guys, but he apparently is on top of it. If anybody's got something they want to say down in the comments, please do, if you have a reference for it or the numbers that he's quoting there. What's the one thing in every hedge fund? Oh, that's not even it. Here's the question. Oh, and then we've got this girl here. Yeah. And she's an Afrocentric, and she'll show you. How do you prove the ancient Egyptians were black? Oh, well, you can't, because they weren't. Was ancient Europe white? Well, yeah, it was Caucasians, and then it's not even white now. I mean, I'm Irish, and I'm a whole lot darker than that paper. It's kind of a stupid thing, just like you call it black, and she is quite dark, but that's chocolate colored and not black. It's brown, but it would sound kind of stupid to call them browns. Just like the football team, the Browns, it's like, come on, guys. Were ancient Semites black? No, nobody in the Bible is really black or anything. They have no connection whatsoever. They try to interject themselves into it. It's another part of history they weren't really a part of at all whatsoever, even including Nilotics or anything that anybody wants to interject. I've got videos about every possible lie that's been told about that and the truth of it. So let's just continue. Francois Marie, we was French. She has a master's degree in public administration and affirmative action. Says someone said that white Europe has some well-guarded dark secrets. Oh no. Those secrets are mostly about its genetic and historical links with Africa. She's not realizing that all of North Africa and Egypt were Caucasians. And back when the Sahara was green, yep, even Cro-Magnon Man. Just pull up Cro-Magnon Man and look at his expanse of where he is. And although a lot of the sites are there in France and things with the cave art and things that we know about, where are the other half at? Are they around the Mediterranean? And no, they don't go around the East Mediterranean. They're in North Africa. And lo and behold, they were a maritime people that were able to cut across that situation. This gives me another question to the girl that started the whole thing with trying to tell you they look like sub-Saharans. Her ideas was that there were glare, but then her other stupid idea I never referred to said that, oh, maybe they were going back and forth for the summer, like they've got a summer home and they were migrating each year. They would have been pretty much walking constantly, wouldn't they? It never happened, but in her mind she's trying to make some way that it could. But then how would you be able, there's no way to walk up through the Sahara or around the whole Sahara, which is just as, it's even longer, and then come all the way around out of Africa, around the whole Mediterranean, Anatolia, up into Greece and around and over, and finally end up way the hell over here, only to turn around and, oh my God, we got to go back and run all the way back around, and you ain't gonna walk. You'd be running all the way back around, all the way around, and you wouldn't even make it deep into Africa before you went, oh my God, and you'd have to run back out. There's no impossibility. That's some type of reality. So when she says African, she means Caucasians usually. In fact, that is usually the case. We really should call them sub-Saharans, but they don't like that narrative either. Well, Africa was named after Caucasians anyhow. Well, I don't like that either. Sorry, man. We're going to eventually stick with something here. This whole pandering thing has gotten disgusting. So what else does Francois say? Europeans are 2/3 Asians and 1/3 Africans, wrote the great Stanford University geneticist Cavell Savora. Oh, she's trying to pull some BS here for you. So, in modern linguistics, with Africa only meaning Negroids of her type, not Nilotics or Khoisan or anything, apparently, are the endemic Caucasians in North Africa. No, it's blacks. And Asians, which I've heard regurgitated back to me that we come from Chinese people, whenever Asians was always Caucasians, all the way through the Tarim Basin mummies. And look at the amount of pyramids that are up there if you look into it. I have videos on it. Also all these blonde-haired mummies that are up there and so on. But that's where a lot of Europeans came from Proto-Europeans that lived up in there. And, you know, just like Russia is today. So it's, yeah, but some of these people come all over here, all the way through Britain and so on. And we're well aware of that. We understand all this concept here. But when you say 2/3 Asian, 1/3 African, yeah, some of the people that were endemic to North Africa and Egyptians, which I've shown in my other videos, actually migrated out and out of Anatolia too. And there we get this idea that 1/3 and 2/3. How about that? How many of them are black? 0. The E1b-HG of East African origins is the third haplogroup in Europe, with 47% of frequency race in southern Greece and in the Peloponnesian region. Yes, and you can tell why you would find somebody with admix showing up with that later. But they can't cognate, and they only think one way. Yeah. Some say those E1b Balkanite Europeans are actually African by core and heavily admixed with Eurasians and have lost their original African composition. Yes, she tries to pull that one. Well, the reason you don't notice it, and the reason it doesn't show up in anything whatsoever, is because I'm lying. It's because they're originally black in the core, see. Then they got mixed with white people and just woof, it went all away. She'd like for somebody to believe that she has a decent idea of what went on. Who were those Africans whose descendants are white Europeans now? Oh, this goes with her starting statement that we have dark secrets. Who were they? Then she all of a sudden changes and flips like a fish on a hot plate and says, I do not think that Europe was originally black. That's funny. But there is evidence that there were pockets of black. Oh, here we go. There are pockets of blacks who migrated from Africa and settled in southern Europe, the Balkans and British Isles and Scandinavia,